You're in for a treat as we explore the scariest stories involving the ocean, while taking the majestic Pokemon Vaporeon and turning it into a nightmare that you'd only find at the darkest depths of the ocean itself. Enjoy these scary stories and let me know what you think of Vaporeon at the end. About the time I was 17 or so, a few friends and I were out at the beach making dry ice bombs in the middle of the night. Probably midnight or so. We were quite delinquent back then. There were about 5 or 6 of us and we were just chilling, having a good time, trying to make potholes in the ground with dry ice bombs in the sand. It was a quiet, foggy night, which isn't too unusual considering I live on the northwest coast, Oregon, and it rains here about 300 days out of the year. After 30 minutes or so of being rambunctious teenagers, we decided to walk down to the beach a bit. After probably 10 to 15 minutes of walking, we hear a strange scratching, grinding sound and stop and listen. Sooner than 20 seconds later, a tall figure emerges from the fog, adjacent to the ocean, but between us and the ocean. Fucker had to be at least 8 feet tall and was dragging a chain. Not just your average chain, but like a fucking massive chain that looked like it was used for an anchor or something. The rings were probably about 8 to 12 inches long apiece, and it looked like they had to be at least an inch in diameter as well. Now, this chain wasn't short by any means. It was probably 40 to 50 feet long, and this dude was just dragging it in the sand behind him. We all sat there silently and got the biggest shiver down my spine, and all my hair stood on end and my breath seemed to escape me. We gathered watching the figure cross our path and make its way up the beach. It and the chain slowly faded out of sight. Well, that was fucking creepy as hell, I thought. We then continued back down the beach to a shipwreck called the Peter Iredale, which is all but eroded by now, and took in the cool sea spray and enjoyed the ominous whooshing of the serene ocean waves. We toss a couple dry ice bombs into the water and head back to our car, where we were parked probably half a mile up the shore. As we were walking, we hear that fucking noise again. My heart thumps and I get the cold sweats. It was that fucking thing again, trudging the goddamn chain up the beach. It had to have been the exact same place where we saw it the first time. There were no drag marks in front of him, no footsteps, no indication that anyone had laid foot on the ground in front of him in the path that had previously walked. The sand was dry, and it wasn't washed over by waves or anything of the sort. We watch it for a moment out of curiosity as to what the actual hell is going on. We stood there dumbfounded, watching that figure trudge through the sand with this unfathomably massive chain dragging behind it. It stopped dragging the chain and stared directly at us, piercing our soul and the essence of our being. We stood there, jaw dropped, staring back at the shadowy figure. It begins to slowly march towards us, and as it does so, we book it right through the sand. I've never ran so fast in my life. We all pile into the car, bro turns the engine, and we frickin' floor it out of there, easily hitting 80 miles an hour on the straight stretch of access road. Absolutely hauled our asses out of there. The entire time I was staring out the back window of the car, some reason expecting it to Terminator after us and catch up to us. Thankfully, it didn't. I never saw that shadowy figure again. It was the strangest, most heart-wrenchingly terrifying thing I have ever experienced. None of us were on any drugs. We were all straight-edge kids, clean as a whistle. Freaking shadowy figures in their chains, scaring kids. Shame on them. A week or so later, a friend of ours who wasn't there that night told me that people used to practice black magic in the dunes there, and that there were artifacts of demonology and inverted crosses scattered all around. I called bullshit on the accusations of such occurrences. Turns out it was true. I went to the mom and asked her about it, and she said she had heard similar stories. So naturally, we looked into it a bit, and then we went out to search for black magic devil worshipping sites. We were able to find some inverted crosses, which were made out of some sort of metal that was all but rusted over, and concreted blocks, probably a cubic meter in size, in a few different places. Holes bored through them and metal rings inserted through them, as if to be an anchor point. I put 2 and 2 together and theorized that the chain was at one point connected to these blocks in the dunes, for Lord knows what purpose. I assumed that creature was of black magic demonology and will never set foot in those godforsaken cursed dunes of devilry again. So, this story takes place about a week ago. Myself and a friend had decided to go to the beach as we both couldn't sleep. So we arrive at the beach, which will remain unnamed, but for reference is on the western coast of New Zealand. Our story begins when we were driving out to the beach. The road is a long and windy road. I have driven this road hundreds of times before, both with and without someone in the vehicle with me. I start to get a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. As we drive past a usually closed car park on the right that has never been open in the 15 or so years I have been coming to this place. Now the time was around 11:30 p.m. We both commented on it but shrugged it off at the thought of the amazing photos we would be able to take with the last night of the full moon. As we arrived at the beach, we parked our car at the unlit car park just further down the beach. Having grown up around this particular beach, I am very confident when it comes to where I am. So we lock the car and head down to the sandy path to the black and white stained surface of the beach. The moonlight casting a creepy glow over everything while providing light for us to walk. We start to head east down the beach towards a large cave situated right at the end. This cave is hidden by a huge sand dune that is, I imagine, accumulated sand from years of the wind whipping it up. This was our destination at the top of this dune, gives us a very unique view of the water. As we head towards this dune, we hear and smell the crackling burning of wood nearby. In this country, it is strictly against the law to have fires on or anywhere near this beach. We noticed a small fire setting off to the right about 150 meters from where we were. I noticed from the corner of my eye, there didn't appear to be anyone around this fire, just a fire burning randomly in the tall, flammable grass next to the dunes. My friend, who we will call Casey, pointed out the fire to me, and we both shrugged it off as some teenagers maybe having some drinks, even though there was no sound around except the crackling of the fire and the slight wind on the beach. About 100 meters down the beach, we encountered the first of the night's, shall we say, issues. I see a man sitting in the middle of the sand just staring out at the water. I didn't initially think this was weird, but upon further inspection, the guy was just staring out at the water, apparently not aware of the two people calling out to him. Strange, but hey, some people are weird that way. So we get to the dune and climb up the 20 or so meters of sand to the top. Just for reference, the black cave mouth was to our backs as we snapped pictures after pictures of the beach and the water, all under the moonlit, clear, starry sky. Suddenly, from behind us comes a strange, growling sound, like a dog, but it was fuzzy, like it was a human pretending to be a dog. I'll be honest, by this time I was ready to get the hell out of there, and I looked at Casey and I said, I have enough nope in my life. I'm going back to the car. As we were descending down the sand dune, the sound got louder and louder. It was like it was following us, and every step we took made it move closer and closer. I'll admit I am not the fittest of people, and neither is my friend, but the adrenaline kicked in, and the moment I grabbed her hand, we booked it down the beach. We only got about 500 meters before the weird staring guy came back into view this time. He was not staring at the water anymore, but he was staring at us. My mother always told me, if something doesn't feel right, it more than likely is not right. I don't know what it was about this man's eyes, but they looked menacing. As we ran towards him, he started to bark at us. As we passed, he got up on all fours like a dog, with his arse in the air, and chased us. I have never been so scared in my life. As I ran towards what I thought was the path we came down, I grabbed my friend's hand and guided her up the path. The growling and barking man had not followed us up the path. I don't know why. Maybe he didn't see us go up the path, or he was just done with us. Spoiler, this path led us deeper into the bush beside the beach. As we walked using a single phone flashlight to guide our way, my foot grazed something not sand or grass, but more solid. As I shone my light down, I saw it was a chewed up shoe that looked like it was abandoned in a hurry. As we fumbled through the brush and tall grass, I could see the road. It was so close, but so far. As I moved towards it, we heard something yell, "What the fuck?" and shone a flashlight at us. It was someone camping in the tall grass. I've never been so happy to see another human being in my life. I said, "We were coming back from the beach and got lost. What's up with you guys? Who is barking on the beach? What's up with the guy who is barking on the beach?" The guy told us he hadn't heard anything at all. "Get out of here before I smash you." We made it back to the road and realized we were still about 1 kilometer from the car by road, but only about 200 meters by the beach. At this time, the internal argument of my lazy self started. We sluggishly walked the roadway, not wanting to go anywhere near the beach. When I got back to my car, I noticed that a part of my trim had been lifted and looked like someone had chewed it. I will never go wandering on that beach at night ever again. It was so creepy, a guy just sitting there on the beach, barking at people in the middle of the night. I remembered this story after hearing on Spotify of the girl whose mom was attacked by a dragon while leaving Laos to Thailand, because my brother could have also been attacked and pulled into a river by a dragon disguised as a fish. Some backstory is that my parents and relatives believe that dragons will disguise themselves as other creatures like fishes or lizards, so if you kill something of the sort, don't talk about it too much. Because if it's a dragon, well, their relatives will come to get revenge on you, because we've seen old videos that our grandma owns of dragons coming and destroying villages or drowning people who unknowingly killed their kids or family members. Our neighborhood was having their annual community event that week, and we usually attend to have fun as well as watch the fireworks later on that night. It was around noon, and they were having a fishing contest for kids from ages 3 to 12, where the kids get to fish for about an hour or more, and then the judges will weigh and measure the fish and give prizes for the top 3 biggest fishes. Since Vivi, my youngest brother, was turning 13 soon, he decided to take part one last time. I'm helping our other cousin, I'll call Eli, at a different part of the river, and our brother Kirito was just a couple feet away from Vivi, also helping a different cousin, Lizzie, while our dad and uncles, cousins' dads, were assisting a couple more cousins much further from us. After 30 minutes of no biting on our end, because, well, they had already given up from being bored of waiting for a bit, we decided to head back to where Vivi was. I noticed Kirito was also heading back with the other cousin that he was helping out. Suddenly, I noticed that Vivi was struggling to pull in his line, and started to call for help. But since I was still pretty far from where he is, I quickened my pace while pulling our cousin along, because I'm not supposed to leave my little cousin behind. Luckily, Kirito was closer and just left the cousin with him with their mom, before sprinting for Vivi. By the time Kirito made it to Vivi, who by now was literally teetering on the grass just above the water where he was standing, and I'm halfway to them. Kirito wraps his arms around Vivi and they both pull, basically dragging the fish out of the water and onto the grass. After they dragged the fish onto the grass, I finally made it to their side, and we're just baffled by how strong that fish was. Our dad and uncles heard Vivi yelling for help, and they made it to us. They undid the fishing line from its mouth before dropping it back into the bucket with water in it to be weighed. And luckily, by the time they got the fish out of the water, it was time for the judges to weigh and measure the fishes. Sadly, the fish Vivi caught was too heavy for him to carry, so I volunteered to help him carry it to the judge's table. As I'm walking with him, I noticed the way he was looking at the fish was strange, and as we got to the table, I noticed the fish was also unusually looking because it looked more like a pike, and that river normally only has small fishes, not big fishes. Maybe a few catfish here and there, but nothing that big. Our uncle, who was with his son, also looked into the bucket because he and his son, named Rai, were walking beside us to bring up their fish. They also had a surprised look on their face when they looked at our fish, and only said to us, "Wow, look at that big fish. Even ours isn't that big." We were confused but told the judges who did the fishing, and they wrote down Vivi's name to stick to the bucket. After that, we were quickly walking back to our parents to wait for the judges to weigh the fishes and announce the winners. Minutes passed and the judges called out, "First place goes to Vivi, second goes to Rai, and third goes to Taylor," some random kid. "Please come up and get your prizes." As Vivi, Rai, and Tyler walk up to claim their prizes with their parents, the judges dump their fishes into clear containers for everyone else to see the fishes. A lot of the people who saw Vivi's fish were whispering about how big it was, and the judges claimed it was either a very big northern pike, bourbon, a herring, trout, or even a very large lake sturgeon. One of the other parents even commented it looked like a barracuda, the fish that killed Nemo's mom, but the judges denied it was a barracuda because it would be too dangerous for a child to hold on to, much less allow in the river around our community, before showing off the catfish Rai caught and the craybeak Taylor caught. Then after each kid picked out their prize, which was fishing tackle boxes and fishing poles, they were asked if they wanted to keep their fishes. Vivi immediately shakes his head and Rai also declines wanting this fish. I don't recall if Taylor kept his, but the judges dumped Vivi and Ray's fish back into the water before thanking all the kids who took part in the event. It wasn't until about a year later that Vivi finally admitted that the reason he was yelling for help was not the fact that he was struggling to pull the fish out of the water. It was because he noticed the fish was staring right at him before he started trying to pull him into the water. And as Vivi was about to fall into the water, Vivi knows he saw teeth, not regular fish teeth, but very, very sharp teeth. Vivi was scared of what would have happened to him if Kirito hadn't made it to him to pull him away from the water's edge. Would the dragon had attacked him? Or just drown him instead? Especially because we hadn't killed any fish or lizard that day, leading up to the day, because, we live in Minnesota, and there's no lizards that's known to live here like that. About 3 years ago, I was a science reporter on board the North Atlantic research vessel, Baseline Explorer. We were roughly 20 kilometers off the coast of Bermuda at the time, and I was getting set to go down in a two-man submersible, something I'd wanted to do since I was a kid. The pilot of the sub was a deep-sea veteran called Percy. Great guy, great sense of humor, spoke with a thick Texan drawl that made even dumb things sound folksy and wise. First words he said to me were, "You ever been down in one of these?" "Never," I was grinning, excited as a schoolboy. I was practically shaking. "You'll never forget it," he assured me. In hindsight, that was some genius level foreshadowing, if I ever heard it. The submersible weighed in at about 8 tons, rigged with state-of-the-art scientific equipment. Massive search beams mounted just forward of the acrylic bubble. They're ultra maneuverable even at the extreme depths. You can spin them 360 degrees on a dime, and they can have this massive hydraulic arm that the pilot controls with a joystick. I saw Percy move that arm so skillfully, I swear to God, he could have plucked the pacifier out of a baby's mouth without even waking it. When he wasn't piloting the sub, Percy liked to play computer games back in the ship's rec room. I've played untold levels of Call of Duty with him, and take it from an old school gamer like me, this guy is crazy good. And what's even crazier, he's 58 years old with 6 grandchildren. Percy was a great guy. But after that voyage, his 103rd, he was never the same guy again. None of us were. The submersible are miracles of engineering. They can withstand about 25 VAs, Earth atmospheres, which basically means 25 times the pressure of surface level. That's the equivalent of an ant moving around with 12 jumbo jetpacks right on top of it. I'll never forget the sensation the first time I slipped down through the bubble's hatch. I was scared. I knew what to expect, but I didn't expect the bubble to be so small. It felt claustrophobic, like climbing down into a tumble dryer. But it actually wasn't so bad once I was seated. We had a panoramic view of the world through the wraparound glass. Better than IMAX, but as the ship's crane lowered us into the water, I couldn't help wondering whether this was the last time I'd ever see the sunlight. I was nervous about the journey ahead. My publishers wanted a video essay of a deep-sea dive in one of the subs, which made sense seeing as my job was to report on all functions of a scientific research vessel. But we were going down close to the sub's limit, almost 1,000 meters, and suddenly the whole thing was very daunting. But Percy quickly put me at my ease. He'd been down over 100 times, and in his opinion, it was safer than driving to the neighborhood liquor store. As the sub descended into the depths, it felt like we were motionless for long periods of time, like we were hanging there in an eternity of blue-tinted space. But Percy assured me we were still descending, still going down, the water becoming bluer, darker, the deeper we went. There was a second submersible trailing us like a ghost. The pilot was an Israeli guy called Avi. He was a stoic son of a bitch. I've been on board the Baseline Explorer 3 weeks, and I've never seen him crack such a smile. He was nicknamed The Machine. The name fit him like a glove. He flashed his searchlights at us at the beginning of the trip when we were hovering close to the surface, and sometimes Percy would talk to him over the radio as we made our way down, but it was all professional chat. The Machine wasn't the kind of person who inspired small talk. As co-pilot of the sub, it was pretty much my job to keep the glass clear of condensation. So every few minutes, I'd give the inside of the acrylic bubble a wipe over. The rest of the time, I was filming and commentating on whatever I was seeing around me. Around 200 meters down, we started moving from the sunlight zone to the twilight or mesopelagic zone. And now the ocean turned this deep aquamarine, like the sky just before dawn. We see a moray eel slithering through the cone of our searchlights. A school of grouper fish flittering around us like silver confetti, and the Machine calls our attention to a couple of small tiger sharks that follow us for a while and then peel off into the darkness. We're almost 1,000 meters underwater and it's pitch black. We're in the midnight zone. Not a single photon of light is able to get down this far. The only source of illumination is our searchlights. We're just fixing to start heading back when suddenly, Percy kills all momentum and we're just hanging there. What's wrong? Percy looked stone-faced. His skin had drained of all color and his lips were trembling, like he was muttering something under his breath. And he had this fixed expression on his face, the intensity to his gaze that warned me something was off. Percy? Percy reached out and snapped the searchlights off. "There's something out here," he whispered. I don't know how to describe the impact those words had on me. You can report the things a man says, but it is hard to convey the way he says them. And the way Percy said, "There's something out there," sent an instant chill down my spine. He sounded scared. Only the sound of our breathing now as we both stared out into the pitch blackness. There was something out there. I couldn't see it, but I could sense it. something was watching us, and I've never felt anything like that before. I was an atheist at the time, but afterwards I would describe it as a religious experience. I have no idea what I meant by that. I was in shock at the time. I don't know what the hell I was saying. What is it? I barely recognized the sound of my own voice. It sounded thin and childlike. Like suddenly, in a heartbeat, I had regressed to infancy. I gripped Percy's arm. What's out there? I turned to him. He looked like death. He looked more scared than I've ever seen a man. Computer lights pattering in his features, shadows scavenging his flesh, his eyes yellow and glazed with terror. What the hell would scare a man like Percy? He was hard as nails, an adrenaline junkie by all accounts, but right then and there, he looked like he was walking the Green Mile. I turned back and stared out the bubble of the Atlantis. Darkness so deep it seemed to swallow my thoughts. What was out there? Why was I shaking with this incomprehensible dread? It felt like a premonition of doom. The searchlights from the second sub carved past us, the machine oblivious to what we could so clearly sense. He was maneuvering his sub sideways, trying to figure out why we had come to a full stop. Turn the lights off, Percy whispered in a voice tight in panic, and then suddenly he jerked forward and flicked the radio toggle. Avie, turn your fucking lights off, he hissed. But it was too late. The searchlights illuminated something in the darkness below us, and to my dying day I wish I'd never seen what I saw next. It has haunted my dreams ever since. I've burned through 3 marriages and an army of therapists. I've attempted suicide 3 times, and I'm addicted to opioids and booze, and I still can't get that image out of my head. At first I thought I was looking down at something kind of luminous disc of immense size. I'd guess 3 times the diameter of our sub, so I'd say about 20 feet across. And it was silvery texture, soft and slightly faceted. There were bands of color radiating outwards from this circle of absolute black that sat right in the center of the disc. I can't describe that black. It was darker than the absence of light. It was the absence of hope. Before he put a bullet in his head 3 years ago, Percy called me up. It was like looking into nothing, he told me. Absolute zero. It tore my fucking mind apart. He was sobbing as he spoke. It was in a bad way. His wife had left him. His kids had disowned him. He'd lost his home, his job, his dignity, and finally, he lost the reason to go on living. And yet, she once said, when you look into the abyss also looks into you. That's what it felt like staring into that black circle. Like it was staring back at me. I saw it for maybe a second before the machine snapped its searchlights off, but there was an eternity in that second. There was the sensation of falling into the abyss, being swallowed by the darkness, of slowly losing my mind. That disc with the black circle in the middle had been a frickin' eye that measured 20 feet across. To this day, my skin goes cold when I remember it. The colossal eye staring at us out of the dark, and the intensity of the gaze was beyond human comprehension. It was an intelligence measured in eons. It was an evil beyond scripture, beyond reason, and it laid its immemorial gaze upon us, and we were blinded by it, scarred by it, destroyed by it. God help us. And then the machine snapped its searchlights off, and the darkness took away the awful vision, but not the memory of it. Felt despair unlike anything I've ever experienced. A black terror filled my heart. That eye, Jesus Christ in heaven, how big was this monster that possessed that eye? It felt biblical. I didn't have to look at Percy to know he was feeling the same thing. That eye did not belong to a thing of reason or nature. It was not a thing of science. It was a monster. It was the mother of every nightmare our children wake up screaming from. And even as I thought this, Percy whispered, "Curse that day, those who are ready to rouse Leviathan." To my ears, he sounded like a dead man quoting scripture. I gazed into the darkness ahead. I knew the eye was still staring at us, even though I could no longer see it. I felt the crushing weight of its gaze, and I was drunk with the horror of it, making sounds at the back of my throat. I attempted to speak, but no words came out. I was trapped. I wanted to run, to hide, but sitting in a tiny submersible 1,000 meters below sea level, there is nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. The radio crackled. The machine was saying something, but I wasn't listening. I was still staring into the god-awful darkness. Something was moving out there. I could sense it, like a mountain turning its ancient face towards us, and I could feel the dreadful gravity of that monster as it turned. The most horrific images flashing through my head. Mass graves filled with bodies not quite dead. A wolf chewing through a leg caught in a hunter's trap. Emaciated children standing behind a chain-link fence. Refugees caught on barbed wire borders, screaming for help. I was tearing at my hair and beating at my skull, but the images only grew more horrific, and my brain felt like one huge pulsing blood clot. I heard Percy howling in pain and terror. I heard my own scream from a million miles away. And then, abruptly, the images were gone. I sucked in a sobbing breath, and I turned to Percy and I yelled, "Get us out of here!" He shook his head. "Look," he said. Something had appeared in the darkness ahead. There was some kind of fissure opening up in the inky void. Fiery glow spilling out of the illuminated that surrounded the ocean. And as I watched, the fissure grew wider and wider until it gaped almost 100 feet wide, maybe more. And that fiery larval glow filled my entire forward vision. It was the color of napalm, a post-nuclear sunset, and staring into the yawning chasm, I swear to God I saw hell incarnate, filled with multitudes of tortured souls. My therapists all said it was hallucinations, but Percy and the machine both saw the same thing. The fissure opened into a cavern of impossible dimensions, so vast it contained entire mountain ranges, and fiery lakes, and rivers of boiling blood, molten rain, burning as it fell from thick sulfur yellow clouds, and I saw naked multitudes, thousands upon thousands of screaming souls, being snatched up by enormous winged beasts and cast into these lakes of fire. The winged beasts were horrific looking, some kind of hybrid. They carried pitchforks and branding irons, and some of them had the heads of birds and the bodies of men, and others were reptilian monstrosities, but all of them, I sensed, were filled with a black hatred for humanity. Percy was screaming the Lord's Prayer, and I remember my mouth stretched wide, gaping in horror, and tears streaming down my face. And then that awful fissure slowly closed, and I think it was at that moment I realized I had been staring into the mouth of that creature. I don't remember how we got back to the surface. I remember they had to handcuff me to the cot in the infirmary once we were back on board the ship. I was screaming. I couldn't stop. They made me wear diapers. I couldn't even control my bowels. I was in the infirmary for 3 days, screaming and shitting myself into a stupor. The machine hung himself a week after returning home. His wife found him. He left a note, a single word in Hebrew, Leviathan. I'm trying to put it behind me. It's been 6 years and I'm the only one left. The days are getting better, and I dread the coming of night, sinking down into sleep the way we sank down into the abyss, terrified of what awaits me in my dreams. I'm never going back into the ocean. And here we have it, Nightmare Vaporeon. I really wanted to go for a very horrific deep sea creature with this one, but still keep some of the aspects of Vaporeon, like the fins on the head, that this could be a Vaporeon Pokemon if maybe it was real or maybe in hell somewhere. What would you like to see me sculpt next? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any scary stories you want to share, be sure to send them my way. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next spooky art video.